You won't believe what happened when my mom, who kicked me out years ago, suddenly reappeared demanding college money for my half-siblings. This isn't just a story. It's a wild ride of family drama, betrayal, and unexpected turns that will leave you speechless. My mother gave birth to me at 20, and my biological father was never in the picture. She said he never wanted children, and since they'd only dated a few months, she gave him the option to leave, which he took. The bitterness of their breakup, she claimed, led her not to demand child support, and he also refused to pay. They never spoke again, which suited them both. Fortunately, my grandparents' unwavering support helped her finish school and find a job. While I was younger, she dated a few men, and when I was about 8, she started seeing Harry, a coworker. They dated for over 3 years before getting married. Harry and I weren't super close, but we tolerated each other well enough around the house. When my mom became pregnant 4 years into their marriage, everyone, including me, was thrilled. Looking back, I probably should have seen the signs, but I was so sure my mom would always be there for me. I hoped she wouldn't abandon me, especially since she'd faced so many challenges raising me alone. After she married Harry, she clearly distanced herself from me, and we started to drift apart. I thought it was just a phase and things would get better. During her pregnancy, I tried my best to be supportive, but it seemed like every time I was around, she got angrier. To avoid bothering her, I decided to make myself scarce, but apparently, I wasn't inconspicuous enough. 6 months after she gave birth to twins, she and Harry sat me down for a serious talk. They told me they couldn't keep me in the house anymore because they had 2 new children to care for. Since I had just turned 16, I was still a minor, so they couldn't legally kick me out without getting into trouble. They tried to convince me by emphasizing the financial strain of providing for a large family on their modest income. But honestly, we had been living comfortably, and I didn't think it was that hard for 2 web engineers to support 2 adults, 1 teenager, and 2 babies. It was clear they just wanted me gone. I really didn't want to leave, so I even tried to suggest solutions, like getting a job if money was the issue. But my mother said she wanted to save money and resources for the children, who deserved it more. She stated that they deserved to stay with them more than I did, not that they needed it more. That was all it took for me to decide I had to leave. It was obvious no one wanted me there, and they knew I had enough dignity to understand that. They had just nudged me in the right direction. After I left, without them even telling me where I should go. Their strategy worked because they hadn't technically evicted me. It wasn't an eviction in the strictest sense, but it felt exactly the same. I felt like I had no other choice after they'd put me in such a difficult position. I went straight to my grandparents' house that day. They were upset about what my mother had done, but they didn't cut her off because they wanted to be there for the twins. At 16, I got a part-time job because I couldn't rely on my grandparents financially due to their age. I'd occasionally see my mom and Harry when they visited my grandparents with the kids, but they rarely asked about me. They were usually very formal, as if they didn't miss me at all. In fact, they seemed happier without me around. I was sad that my mother appeared less irritable without me, but I knew there was nothing I could do. I lived with my grandparents until it was time for college. Even then, my mom wasn't involved. I had to rely on friends to help me settle into my dorm because my grandparents weren't healthy enough to do it. My mom and Harry refused, preferring to save money for the twins' future. So, I had to take out a student loan, and thankfully, one of my uncles co-signed it after I promised him he'd never be responsible for any of the costs. I worked throughout college to ensure I didn't fall behind on payments and to give myself a financial head start. My mother and I barely spoke once. I started college, and only my grandparents were there when I graduated. My mother didn't even bother to congratulate me. To avoid being a burden on my elderly grandparents, I started working and living independently after college. During the first few years, I didn't make much money, but I was able to pay for groceries, utilities, rent, and even started paying off my debt while saving for the future. I'd describe it as living on a very limited income. Fortunately, things eventually improved. It took a while, but I steadily rose through the ranks of my organization. Considering how little help I received, I'm proud of how far I've come, and I am now in a rather comfortable position. Unexpectedly, my mother found out I earn a good living, even though we hadn't spoken in years. I'm almost 33 and currently hold a senior management role at the same company where I began my career. About 4 months ago, I got a big promotion, but I wanted to keep it secret, so only a select few knew. I did tell my uncle to thank him for co-signing my loan when I was struggling with college expenses. From what I understand, he recently met my mom and Harry at a family gathering and encouraged her to contact me to congratulate me on my success. I'm sure he meant well, but it didn't work out because she didn't even reach out to offer congratulations. In the end, my mother found out and recently visited my home with Harry, insisting on talking to me. I should mention I hadn't spoken to her since I started college. I blocked her everywhere and cut her out of my life after graduating, as I saw no point in hoping she would change. She didn't seem negatively affected, and honestly I doubt she even noticed. Only my grandparents, who knew I disliked discussing my mother, stayed in contact with me, and they avoided the subject. I didn't really stay in touch with my uncle either, so I was unaware that my mom and Harry had been having financial difficulties for a few years. I only found out when they arrived at my door and told me how bad things had gotten. It was wishful thinking, but the only reason I let them inside was because I hoped they were coming to make amends. They started by saying they had heard from my uncle about my promotion and how I was one of the youngest people in such a prominent position at my firm. Instead of congratulating me, it seemed they were surprised I had kept it from them. Ironically, I was shocked that they expected me to communicate with them at all, let alone deliver good news. They were also disappointed that I had shut them out of my life, claiming it was only because they had prioritized their children over me. They insisted I should have been old enough to understand their rearranged priorities and not harbor resentment as a teenager. They said I should have supported their decisions instead of moving in with my grandparents. I'm not even sure why. They thought I'd agree with their choice to kick me out of the house. They tried to gaslight me into thinking I was the bad guy for being angry that they had ejected me so they could spend time alone with their children. But that's how they started our reunion after all these years. They talked about how tough the past few years had been for them without even giving me a chance to explain my side of the story. They described how they had launched their own company, but it unfortunately failed, resulting in losses. They were now trying to make up for previous losses and desperately needed money as the twins were nearing college age. That's when I understood why they had come. They needed financial assistance. They wasted no time getting straight to the point, even trying to soften it by claiming I could make it up to them by paying for my siblings' schooling. But at first, they were just upset that I hadn't contacted them despite doing well. Their attempt to make it seem like they were doing me a favor by allowing me to pay for the college education of 2 children I barely knew astounded me. One immediately told them I wouldn't be doing that and that it was disrespectful of them to think they could coerce me. I became furious and reminded them they were the reason. I had to work through college and pay for my own education because they wanted to, save for their real children, who they believed deserved it more than I did. They had refused to support me financially back then. I assured them they had no right to expect anything from me now, especially financial support, since I had never questioned their choice to put the twins first and had simply left them alone. They truly no longer had the right to demand that I communicate with them, instead of trying to emotionally control me. I pointed out that they could now use the same money they wished to conserve for the children who deserved it to pay for the twins' college bills. I had nothing else to say, so I asked them to leave. I was foolish to invite them into my house in the first place, assuming they might have come to express regret for their treatment of me. They became irritated and tried to shift the blame when I insisted they leave. They told me I wasn't innocent in this case, claiming I was overenthusiastic, overinvolved, and frequently irritable when we all lived together. I was only a teenager trying to stay connected to my family as they drifted away from me, so I couldn't believe that was a real issue they had with me. They then had the audacity to claim I was no better than them since I had denied their request. They said I was forgetting all the years my mother had taken care of me and raised me alone. They said this was my opportunity to make it up to her and her sister, but I was being rude and unappreciative instead. Since I was a child at the time, I thought it was absurd that they would bring that up. Even if I had wanted to, I couldn't have decided not to rely on them. Furthermore, it wasn't like they were helping me. They pushed me out of the house and effectively forced me out as soon as they believed I was mature enough to manage things on my own. For the following 18 years, they refused to acknowledge my existence. I was still shocked they had the goal to expect me to aid them now, as if I owed them something, even after everything that had happened. During the dispute, things became quite personal and ugly, and I finally threatened to call the police if they didn't leave my property. My mother reminded me of all the sacrifices she had made when I was younger, ostensibly because she wanted to be a good mother. Before they finally left after more arguments, she then said I had been ungrateful. The one time she had expected me to sympathize with her predicament and allow her to put other people before myself, she now claimed that I was portraying her as the villain, rather than the other way around. Since then, this has been bothering me and I'm having trouble figuring out whether I'm to blame, whether I've been expecting too much from my mother, or whether she's simply deceiving me. I decided to post on Reddit to get some unbiased perspectives, even though I'm quite sure I'm correct. Am I the a-hole for not paying for my half-siblings' college tuition just because my stepfather and estranged mother are having financial difficulties? Even though my uncle had excellent intentions, I reminded him that what he did was wrong and unacceptable. His actions undoubtedly had a negative effect. I wouldn't be in this predicament if he hadn't shared my life with my mother and disclosed my contact details without my consent. He apologized profusely, stating that he was unaware of their financial difficulties and had no idea my mother would respond in this manner. He admitted that he had no business telling my mother about my life and that if we had wanted to get back together, we would have done so without his help. Since his heart was in the right place, I don't intend to cut him out of my life. I would have been much angrier if he had meant something different. He simply made an error. Besides, it was because of him that I was initially able to attend college. He was the only person who was prepared to assume the responsibility of co-signing my loan application. If you think about it, I might not be in this situation at all if it weren't for him. I made sure to let him know that what he did wasn't appropriate, since I don't want to come across as unappreciative, but I'm also not a doormat. Whatever I did was fair enough, and I believe I found the ideal balance. We're doing great together, and I won't hold anything against him because I needed this resolution. I also discussed my mom's recent struggles with my grandparents. They believe I'm correct and have promised to try and persuade her to change her mind. I realized that they didn't want to lose touch with their other grandchildren, which is why they've remained in contact with my mom. They understand the struggles my mom's family is going through, but they don't think it's right or fair to put me through this. That's their position on the issue, and I believe it's reasonable enough. Since we last spoke, which was nearly 9 days ago, my mother has taken it upon herself to remind me of all she did for me growing up. She probably sends me an email every other day to make me feel like I owe her something. It's not like she did me a favor by raising me alone. She was legally required to take care of me, so I don't really understand her point. She only raised me when it was convenient for her. She and her spouse decided to expel me as soon as I started to cause them trouble, citing the need to save money for the twins in their future. Now that we're in the future and the twins are adults, I believe they should rely on themselves rather than wasting time trying to manipulate and guilt-trip me. Although I had been ignoring her emails, I decided to reply a few days ago. I explained to her everything I had written in my essay. She didn't take it well, as expected, and labeled me ungrateful once more. I just informed her that calling me names would not alter the truth and that I no longer wanted any contact with her because she had been a bad mother. I blocked her email account after that, but she made a new one to continue to annoy me since she never did the same for me. I blocked that one as well, and I'll keep doing so until she understands that I'm not here to mope about her. To be honest, I'm glad we're finally having this discussion because I think it will end quickly, and I'll have the necessary closure. The only reason I welcomed them into my house and talked to them that day was because I was still clinging to the hope that perhaps they had changed. That perhaps they were there to congratulate me and make amends. However, speaking with them made me realize that they are just not the type of individuals who are able to experience regret, guilt, or shame. I've completely given up on ever making amends with them after it once again made me realize how and cunning they are. My mother's appearance at my place of employment earlier today was, I believe, the most bizarre thing she has ever done. Fortunately, I wasn't working today, so she left really fast and didn't succeed in her endeavor. I was feeling a little under the weather, so I decided to take the day off, and I'm so happy I did. She would have definitely thrown a fit or done anything to make me look foolish if I'd been present. When the receptionist called to inform me that my mom had arrived wanting to see me and refusing to leave despite being told I wasn't there, I learned the truth when they put her on the phone with me. I firmly told her that I was at home, even though I was already rather anxious about what she might do. She was informed that if she attempted anything at my place of employment, I would sue her until she would be too ashamed to send her children to college. I did my best to sound threatening, so I believe it truly frightened her. She agreed to leave right away, provided I met her in person, so it must have worked. I reminded her that she couldn't afford a lawsuit at the moment and informed her that she wasn't in a position to be making demands. I also mentioned that my employer would not think twice about suing her if the situation worsened, which would be a very different scenario because they wouldn't be as forgiving as I'd been. She'd be better off just leaving in silence. I didn't get any more calls or notifications regarding the event, so I guess she left after giving the phone back to the receptionist. I can't afford for this to happen again because that was undoubtedly a close call. I've decided to speak with a lawyer to find out what precautions I can take. She hasn't threatened me directly, so I'm not sure if this is enough to get a restraining order, but I still want to speak with the attorney to discuss my alternatives. I just have to hope that this experience was unpleasant enough for her to think about leaving me alone. I suppose I don't need to consider filing a restraining order, since I'm very certain we now have grounds for one. When my mother arrived at my place of employment last week, I was able to persuade her to leave. However, in light of this week's events, I believe that a restraining order against her needs to be issued for everyone's safety. She was waiting outside my door when I got home from work a few days ago. I informed her right away that I didn't want to argue and that I would call the police if she didn't leave. She practically raced at me and threw me to the ground, sending my phone flying out of my hands as I was ready to dial. She cursed at me and blamed me for everything that had gone wrong in her life while she attempted to beat me up. It took me a while to react, since I was so taken aback by her insane conduct. However, because I consistently work out and am much younger than her, it was simple for me to overpower her when I did. Fortunately, all the shouting had alerted my neighbors to the problem and caused them to call the police. They even came to my aid and restrained my mother as we awaited the arrival of the cops. I decided to file charges when the police eventually arrived. She is currently in a lot of trouble. In addition, I've discussed this with my attorney and requested a restraining order against her. I've been informed that Harry has taken the children and moved in with his parents. I'm not sure if he intends to come back anytime soon. He apparently challenged her about her behavior after seeing her and informed her that she couldn't continue acting in this manner. She also got into a fight with him, which seems to mean she's really lost it. I believe she finds it difficult to believe that I'm doing well in life. But in all honesty, she is to blame for her own issues. I will not feel sorry for her. I'll have the restraining order in place soon, and since I'm making more money, I've already started thinking about moving into a larger home since now seems like the ideal moment. I'm going to start exploring my alternatives. Being linked to someone like that is embarrassing, so I sincerely hope my mother receives the support she needs and learns to behave normally. She has also been nasty to my grandparents, who have told me they no longer want to be around her. The only person she can blame for everyone avoiding her is herself. Anyway, I'm not worried about it anymore. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.